Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of mud, smoke, and aching backs. The life of a medieval peasant farmer. You probably won't survive this. The year is somewhere between the 12th and 14th century. Dawn is just breaking, and your home is more a glorified animal shed than a cozy cottage. The air smells of damp straw and old sweat. A hen is roosting somewhere above your head, and a thin line of light slices through the cracks in your wooden shutters. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me your location and what time it is where you're watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rooster doesn't need an alarm clock. You hear him before the sky even turns grey. You shift under your rough wool blanket, if you can call it that, and immediately regret moving. The straw mattress beneath you crunches and pricks your skin like 1,000 tiny splinters. There's no such thing as a soft start to your day here. Comfort is for lords and clergy. You get pain, drafty walls, and the lingering scent of yesterday's turnip stew. You rise, or rather, you unfold yourself from a cramped sleep beside 2 children and possibly a goat. The cottage is 1 room, maybe 2 if you're lucky. Smoke hangs low from last night's fire, and your eyes sting as soon as you breathe in. Your wife, if you have one, is already stirring a pot of watery porridge. She doesn't greet you. Words are wasted when there's so much work waiting. It's early spring, and the fields demand your attention before the sun fully rises. You pull on the same woolen tunic you wore all week. It's stiff with dirt, but you tell yourself that's just nature's armor. The floor is packed earth, and your boots, simple leather, cracked at the seams, squelch as you step into the mud outside. The morning is cold, and your breath fogs in front of you. Dew clings to everything. The air hums faintly with crows and the distant ringing of the church bell. Time doesn't belong to you here. It belongs to the bell, to the lord of the manor, to the turning of the seasons. You glance at the horizon. The manor house sits high above the fields, its stone walls glowing faintly in the rising light. You don't live there, of course, but it's always watching. A reminder that your land, your labor, even your body, ultimately belong to someone else. You grab your wooden spade and trudge toward the strip of earth your family works. The land is divided into narrow, uneven plots, separated by low hedges and muddy paths. It's not yours, in any real sense. You're allowed to farm it in exchange for rent, taxes, and several days of unpaid labor each week for the Lord's own fields. Historians still argue whether most peasants were truly serfs, bound to the land, or simply tenants paying rent. Either way, freedom is mostly an illusion. If you vanish tomorrow, someone else will be farming your patch before the next Sunday Mass. As the sky brightens, so does the village around you. Smoke rises from thatched roofs. A few dogs bark at nothing in particular. Somewhere, a child cries. You take it all in like background noise. It's the soundtrack of survival. You start your morning chores mucking out the animals, checking your few chickens, and praying that the pig hasn't escaped again. That pig is more valuable than half your possessions combined. It's your walking savings account. It'll either feed your family for a winter or pay your debts, assuming it doesn't die of some mysterious pig disease first. You shovel manure into a pile beside the door. The smell is unbearable, but you hardly notice anymore. Your hands are rough, nails cracked and permanently tinted with earth. You catch your reflection in the water trough, mud-streaked, unshaven, eyes half closed from exhaustion. Congratulations, you look like every other peasant in Christendom. By now, your stomach growls. Breakfast is calling, though calling might be too generous a term. Inside, your wife hands you a wooden bowl of porridge. It's thin, barely salted, and has the consistency of regret. You gulp it down anyway. Occasionally, you chew something crunchy that shouldn't be there, probably a grain husk or a small rock. You glance at the wall. It's plastered with wattle and daub, a mix of mud, straw and dung. You patched a hole in it last week, but the wind still finds its way in. The roof leaks. The floor floods when it rains, and yet, somehow, this place is your castle. As the sun rises higher, you step back outside and take a deep breath. The scent of wet earth, smoke, and animal waste hits you like a memory you can't escape. There's something oddly comforting about it, though. It's the smell of purpose, of continuity. You're living the same routine your ancestors did, and their ancestors before them. Still, the irony is hard to ignore. You own nothing yet owe everything. The Lord Steward will ride through the village soon, counting sheep and measuring fields, making sure every penny and peasant is accounted for. And you'll bow your head, mumble something about loyalty, and hope he doesn't notice that one of your hens looks suspiciously borrowed. You hear footsteps behind you. Your neighbor, Thomas, trudging past with a yoke over his shoulders. He grins, missing 2 teeth. "Morning, friend," he says, voice like gravel. You nod, too tired to reply. His breath smells faintly of ale. You can't tell if that's from last night or breakfast. As you both walk toward the fields, the conversation turns to gossip. Who's sick? Who's expecting? Who's been cursed by bad luck or bad behavior? The village thrives on rumor as much as it does on barley. One woman supposedly turned a man's milk sour with a glance. Another's been seeing omens in her bread crusts. You chuckle, half believing it all. The truth is, superstition fills the gaps that reason can't reach. When your life depends on weather and soil, you start seeing patterns in everything. A red sky might mean rain. A dead crow might mean death. And if your crops fail, well, maybe someone whispered the wrong prayer. By mid-morning, your arms ache. You're still not halfway through turning the soil. The oxen move at a pace that could only be described as existential. You prod them with a stick, muttering under your breath. A cloud of gnats buzzes around your head, and the sun finally breaks through, warming the mud just enough to release a smell that makes your stomach lurch. You take a short break, wiping sweat from your brow. The horizon stretches endlessly, dotted with laborers just like you bent, slow, steady. From above, it might look peaceful. From here, it's just back-breaking monotony. There's one small mercy today, no rain. Last week's storm flooded half the lower fields, and everyone's still drying grain by the fire. You glance at the sky with suspicion, knowing how fickle it is. Historians still debate whether medieval farmers truly understood crop rotation, or if they just relied on luck and divine patience. Either way, you're at the mercy of forces far beyond your control, both heavenly and human. You press on until your hands tremble. Sweat drips into your eyes, and your back feels like it's made of splinters. Finally, the bell rings again from the church tower. It's noon. You're halfway through your day, but already, it feels like you've lived a lifetime. You wipe your hands on your tunic, streaking dirt across your face, and glance toward the village. Smoke curls upward, promising food, or at least the idea of it. You sigh, shoulders heavy, and mutter, maybe tomorrow will be easier. A spoiler. It won't. The church bell fades into the distance, replaced by the steady groan of wood, the creak of ox yokes, and the wet slap of mud against your boots. Noon isn't a time for rest. It's just the midpoint in a day that never truly ends. You take a deep breath, stretch your aching shoulders, and turn back to the field. The soil is heavy with moisture, sticky and stubborn, clinging to every tool you touch. You dig your heels into the ground and press the plow forward, your oxen trudging with the patience of saints. Each furrow you carve feels like a minor victory against a world that seems designed to break you. The air smells of churned earth and old rain. Your fingers ache from gripping the handle, your palms blistered beneath layers of callus. You pause for a second, leaning against the plow to catch your breath. Your arms shake from the effort, and you can feel sweat tracing a path through the grime on your forehead. The work is endless, but you don't dare stop for long. Somewhere behind you, the steward could be watching, ready to report any idleness to the manor. A fine or beating might follow, depending on his mood. A crow lands nearby, hopping across the newly turned soil. It watches you with the same detached curiosity as everyone above your station. You mutter something at it, half prayer, half insult, and push forward again. The sound of distant laughter catches your ear. 2 children, barefoot, muddy, wild-haired, are chasing each other along the edge of the field. Their joy feels strange, almost alien, like something that belongs to another world. You can't remember the last time you laughed like that. Maybe back when your hands were still small enough to fit inside your father's. Your mind drifts as the plow moves. The rhythm of it becomes hypnotic. Step, push, grunt, breathe. The sun climbs higher, the heat pressing against your neck, but you keep going. The soil doesn't care that you're tired, and neither does the Lord who owns it. Sometimes you think about him, your landlord. You've seen him only twice, both times from a distance. His cloak was trimmed with fur. His boots actually matched, and he smelled like something other than livestock. He didn't even glance your way, of course. To him, you're a figure in the background of his wealth, a moving shadow in a field that feeds his table. But that's the order of things. God at the top, the king beneath him, lords and knights below that, and then you, somewhere near the bottom, possibly next to the village pig. Historians still argue whether peasants like you felt content within this system, or just too exhausted to rebel. Maybe it's both. You can't question what you can't afford to change. Your stomach growls again, pulling you out of thought. It's nearly time for your midday break. You wipe your hands on your tunic and head toward a small patch of shade near a hedgerow. The air cools slightly as you sit, and for the first time since sunrise, you let your back touch the earth. Your meal is simple: a hunk of coarse bread, a wedge of cheese that smells a bit suspicious, and a small wooden cup of ale. The bread is dense, made with whatever flour you could afford, or barter, for this week. Sometimes it's barley, sometimes oats, occasionally mixed with rye. It's rough enough to scrape the roof of your mouth, but it fills you. You take a slow bite, eyes half closed, and watch the dust swirl in the air. Somewhere nearby, a bee hums lazily. For a moment, everything feels almost peaceful. Then a stone turns under your boot, and you spill half your ale into the dirt. You sigh. It's a luxury you can't replace until the next brewing. Thomas joins you again, settling beside you with a groan. He tears at his own bread, squinting into the sunlight. Hard soil this year, he mutters. You nod. Feels harder every year. He chuckles, but it sounds more like a cough. Maybe God's just making sure we stay humble. You smirk. Then, he's doing a fine job. You sit in silence for a while, chewing slowly, the conversation drifting like smoke. Every villager knows this quiet rhythm, the exchange of few words, the shared ache of repetition. A faint sound rises from the direction of the manor hooves. The steward again, perhaps. You instinctively straighten, brushing crumbs from your tunic. Even out here, far from the village centre, the presence of authority feels heavy, and then he appears, riding a chestnut horse far too fine for muddy lanes. His boots gleam, his cloak spotless despite the path. He surveys the field like a hawk searching for mice. You and Thomas bow slightly, avoiding eye contact. The steward reins in his horse and clears his throat. Harvest thin, he says, Lord de Brant expects his due all the same. You nod, forcing a smile. Aye, sir. Weather's been cruel. He smirks. Then pray harder. He turns and rides off, leaving hoofprints and resentment behind. You watch him go, jaw clenched. For a moment, you imagine what it would be like to switch places. To sit high, untouched by mud or hunger. Then you shake the thought away. That kind of dreaming only leads to trouble. You and Thomas return to work. The afternoon passes in a haze of motion. Plow, seed, breathe, repeat. The fields stretch endlessly, each furrow an echo of the one before. Occasionally, a breeze cuts through, carrying the scent of wildflowers from the hedgerow. It feels almost unfair that something so beautiful can exist beside such exhaustion. You stop to adjust the ox harness. The leather strap bites into your fingers, but you manage to fix it. Your father taught you that trick, how to twist the buckle just so to relieve the strain. You think of him now, his face carved with the same lines you're beginning to see in your reflection. He used to say, "The earth feeds you only if it likes you." You're still not sure it does. By late afternoon, your muscles have turned to lead. Each step feels heavier than the last. The sun sinks lower, shadows stretching long across the furrows. You glance toward the village and see smoke rising, supper fires being lit. The thought of warmth and food keeps your feet moving. Still, there's something satisfying about this brutal routine. The rhythm, the repetition, the certainty. You know what tomorrow holds, and the day after that, and probably the next 30 years. There's strange comfort in that. No decisions, no surprises, just endurance. And yet, deep down, you can't help wondering, is this all there is? You've heard tales of merchants in cities, of soldiers who travel, of monks who spend their days writing instead of digging. But those are stories, not lives. Your world ends where the fields meet the forest. You pause to wipe your brow again, looking toward the trees at the horizon. The forest seems endless, dark, full of secrets. They say bandits live there, and spirits too. The kind that steal your voice or twist your path, so you never find your way home. Children whisper about them at night, but even adults avoid the woods after dusk. As the last furrow is turned, you straighten your back and listen to the quiet. The fields are done for now, though tomorrow will demand more of the same. The oxen stand still, sides heaving, eyes half closed in exhaustion. You pat one of them gently, murmuring thanks. The sun has dipped below the hills when you finally start back. The path to your cottage is slick, your legs unsteady. You can hear laughter in the distance. A few villagers sharing ale outside the tavern, maybe even singing. You smile faintly. But as you pass the church, you slow. Its stone walls glow faintly in the dying light, the bell silent now. You whisper a quick prayer, not for salvation, but for strength to do it all again tomorrow. Inside, the air grows colder. Smoke rises from a dozen hearths, carrying the mixed scent of burning peat, stew, and damp wool. You exhale, shoulders loosening just a bit. You've made it through another half day of survival, though you're not sure how many more your body can take. The sky deepens to indigo, and the first stars appear, tiny sparks of light above a world that feels endlessly dark below. You stand there a moment, watching, mud still clinging to your boots, knowing dawn will come too soon. Tomorrow, the cycle begins again. The first thing you notice when you wake again isn't light, it's sound. A dull, rhythmic cough, somewhere close, cutting through the haze of sleep. You blink groggily, eyes stinging from the thin smoke curling up from last night's dying fire. The cottage feels smaller this morning, the air heavier. Someone must have fed the fire with damp wood again. You sit up, rubbing your face, and catch the faint whiff of burnt straw and old porridge. Your stomach rumbles immediately, though not out of hunger exactly, more out of habit. In this life, you eat not because you're ready, but because it's time. Your wife's already awake, wrapped in a shawl that's seen better decades. She's stirring something in the pot, hanging over the fire, her movements slow but precise. The wooden spoon clinks against the pot, a tired rhythm. "Morning," she says, voice hoarse. You nod. Too tired to respond yet. The floor feels cold under your bare feet. You shuffle to the corner where your boots sit, still caked with yesterday's mud. Pulling them on feels like punishment. The leather's stiff, the stitching frayed. Outside, the sky is pale and flat, the kind of light that promises a long, hard day. You step through the low door, ducking instinctively, and breathe in the cold air. It smells of manure, dew, and wood smoke. Your world condensed into 3 unchanging scents. Breakfast is waiting, though waiting might be too optimistic a word. You sit on the rough bench by the fire, bowl in hand. The porridge is grey thick and steaming. There's no honey or milk, luxuries saved for the few, not the many. You take a cautious spoonful, trying not to think about how the same pot's been in use since before your first child was born. The grain scrapes your tongue, a bit of grit crunching between your teeth. You wash it down with a sip of small ale, weak, cloudy, and barely alcoholic. It's safer than the well water, which always tastes faintly of earth and metal. You hear a faint scratching sound at your feet. A chicken, bold as ever, pecking at the dirt floor. Your wife shoos it away with the spoon, muttering. "You'd think they'd learn," she says. "They're smarter than we are." You reply half, smiling. It earns a faint laugh, which feels like sunlight in this dim space. The door creaks open again, and your eldest child appears, a thin, wide-eyed boy of about 10, barefoot and shivering slightly. He's holding a small loaf of bread, yesterday's bake, hard enough to double as a weapon. "Father," he says, "the pig's out again." "Of course it is." You sigh, setting the bowl aside, and grab your cloak. The pig, your pride and perpetual curse, has a habit of testing the fence whenever you least have the energy to fix it. You step outside, boots sinking into the mud, and follow the trail of snorts and hoofprints. The village is stirring to life now. Thin threads of smoke rise from chimneys, and figures shuffle through the mist, wrapped in rough wool and half asleep. Somewhere a woman is shouting, calling for her geese. Somewhere else, a dog barks at nothing. You find the pig near the edge of your plot, nosing at the roots of a hedge. "You again," you mutter. It looks up, unimpressed. You grab the rope tied around its middle and tug. It resists, naturally. You sigh. "Come on, friend. We've both got better things to do." After a short wrestling match that leaves both of you filthy, you get it back inside the pen and tie the gate tighter. Your back protests with every movement. You can already tell today's going to be one of those days when your muscles feel like they're made of old rope. You glance toward the manor road. The steward's not expected today, but his absence doesn't bring comfort. It just means he's saving his surprises for later. By the time you return inside, your family's already cleaning up. The fire's burned low, and the cottage feels a bit warmer, now that bodies have filled it for an hour. You grab the last chunk of bread from the table, tear it in half, and tuck it into your pouch. That'll be lunch, if you remember to stop for it. Then it's back to the fields. The air outside carries the faint scent of dew and cow dung. The closest thing you'll ever get to morning freshness. You trudge through the muck, the weight of the day settling on your shoulders before the sun's even high. By mid-morning, your stomach is already grumbling again. You ignore it. Hunger is a background noise in your life, never loud enough to panic, never quiet enough to forget. As you work, your mind drifts to food. Not just any food, but the kind you've heard of only in stories. Roasted meats, spices from the east, wine sweet as honey. A traveling monk once described them while stopping in your village. He said, Noblemen ate until they were bored, not until they were full. You'd thought he was joking, but his tone was too tired for lies. Historians still argue whether the average peasant was malnourished year-round or just seasonally miserable. You can confirm firsthand it's both. Spring brings hope but little food. Summer brings labor and debt. Winter. Well, winter brings prayer. A movement at the edge of the field catches your eye. A neighbor, Agnes, is walking toward you with a small basket. She's older, her face lined like dry parchment. But she's kind. The sort who always has something to share, even if it's nothing much. She waves. "Got a few onions," she says, holding up the basket. You smile. "You'll make me jealous." "Ha! Don't be. They'll make you cry anyway." You laugh, a sound that feels strange in your own mouth. She hands you 2 onions, wrapped in cloth. "For your stew tonight," she says. You thank her, meaning it more than you can say. In a world this small, kindness is currency more precious than silver. As she walks away, you watch her figure fade into the mist. You think about how everyone here lives by the same thread. Helping when they can, gossiping when they can't. It's not charity, it's survival. The sun climbs higher, and you finally stop to eat your bit of bread. It's gone stale, the crust hard as bark. You soften it with a sip of ale and chew slowly, thinking of the onions waiting at home. Dinner might actually taste like something tonight. A low hum fills the air, the sound of bees moving through the hedgerows. You watch them for a while, tiny miracles of order and persistence. You envy their certainty, their purpose. You wonder if they ever feel the weight of their work, or if they just do it. Your thoughts drift again to faith. You've been told since childhood that work is holy, that labor is love made visible. But as you drive your spade into the stubborn earth again, it's hard to feel anything divine about blisters. Maybe God's watching. Maybe he's laughing. By late afternoon, the sky turns grey again. A fine drizzle begins to fall, coating everything in a slick film of mud. You sigh but keep working. Rain doesn't excuse you. It only makes your tools heavier and your patience thinner. Thunder rumbles in the distance. The oxen grow restless. You finish one more furrow, then decide it's time to retreat. You cover the seed sacks with a rough tarp and head for home, boots squelching with every step. The rain picks up by the time you reach the cottage. You duck inside, shaking off droplets like a soaked dog. The fire's lit again, crackling softly. Your wife looks up. You're drenched. Better wet than lazy, you mutter, dropping your tools by the door. She laughs softly. The smell of onions fills the air already, sweet and sharp. Dinner tonight is thin stew, mostly broth, but with just enough flavor to make you close your eyes and pretend it's a feast. You sit together on the floor, sharing the meal in quiet. The children nod off before finishing their bowls, and for a brief moment, the house feels peaceful. You listen to the rain outside, steady and soft, and feel a small, fragile comfort settle over you. Tomorrow, the fields will be heavier with mud. Your hands will ache again. But tonight, there's warmth and food, and the gentle rhythm of rain against the roof. You think maybe that's enough. The rain doesn't stop by morning. It just softens into a drizzle that clings to everything. Your cloak feels permanently damp, and the air smells like wet hay and cold ashes. The rooster crows as usual, though even he sounds half-hearted about it. You pull yourself out of sleep, every muscle protesting, and blink toward the dim light filtering through the cracks in the shutters. Your wife's already awake. She's kneeling near the hearth, coaxing last night's embers back to life with a few stubborn twigs. A curl of smoke rises, sharp and bitter. The children are still huddled under their blanket pile, breathing slow, soft breaths that make you briefly jealous. You run a hand over your face, gritty with dried sweat and soil, and stand. The floor's cold. Outside, the world looks blurred, mist over the fields, the horizon swallowed by grey. You step out to relieve yourself behind the shed and catch the distant sound of hooves. You know that rhythm, not a farmer's cart. A horse, well fed, moving with that particular arrogance that means only one thing. The Lord's steward. You groan quietly. Of all mornings, it had to be this one. You wipe your hands, pull your cloak tighter, and trudge toward the field road just as he appears. A figure on horseback, flanked by a thin boy carrying parchment and a wax seal. The steward looks exactly how someone named Joffrey would in your imagination: tall, too clean, wrapped in layers of wool and smugness. His gloves are spotless, his boots gleaming even in the mud. The boy, meanwhile, looks half-starved and entirely miserable. He stops when he sees you, reining in his horse. "You there," he says. "Your plot lies east of the mill, doesn't it?" You nod, heart sinking. "Aye, sir." "And your rent's due next week." He says it like a line from a sermon. Flat, unfeeling, inevitable. You swallow. "The harvest was lean this year, sir. If you could give us a bit more time." He cuts you off with a look sharp enough to slice bark. The Lord's generosity is not an open purse. You'll pay what's owed, in coin or in kind. You nod again, keeping your eyes low. There's no point arguing. The boy beside him scribbles something on the parchment with a quill. You can't read, but you know your name's on that list somewhere, inked beside a number that might as well be a death sentence. The steward glances toward your cottage. The roof's in poor repair, he says, as though it's your personal insult to his aesthetic sensibilities. If it collapses before rent's collected, you'll still owe. "Yes, sir." He sniffs, turns his horse, and rides off toward the next cottage, leaving hoofprints like scars in the mud. You stand there a moment, fists clenched, the drizzle running down your neck. Behind you, your wife appears at the doorway. "Was it him again?" she asks quietly. You nod. She doesn't say anything else. There's nothing to say. You walk to the field anyway. What else is there to do? The oxen are restless, their hides glistening with moisture. You grab the plow handle, feeling the familiar grooves worn into it by years of calloused hands, and push forward. The ground squelches, resisting every step. The drizzle turns the earth slick, heavy, reluctant to move. You mutter a prayer under your breath, not for mercy but for traction. By midday, you're back screaming. You stop long enough to stretch and glance toward the manor again. It's barely visible through the fog, but you can imagine the life within. Warm hearths, roasted meats, laughter echoing against stone walls. You wonder if the steward ever gets tired of reminding people how small they are. Probably not. Historians still argue whether medieval landlords were cruel out of greed, or simply following the customs of their time. From where you stand, covered in mud and regret, it feels like both. A shout startles you from your thoughts. You turn to see Thomas trudging toward you, one arm raised in greeting. His expression is grim. "You heard the news?" he asks as he reaches you. "Depends which news," you reply. "If it's bad, then yes." He snorts. "Miller says the Lord's upping the tithe this season. Claims the church needs more grain for pilgrims and widows." You laugh, but there's no humor in it. Aye, and the pilgrims all seem to live in the manor's kitchen. Thomas shakes his head. "Maybe it's God's will." You shrug. If so, he's got expensive taste. You both return to work, side by side, wordless. The rain eases to a mist, and a weak patch of sunlight struggles through the clouds. It feels like a trick, but you'll take it. Later, as you rest by the hedgerow, you tear a piece of bread in half and offer it to Thomas. He accepts, grateful. The bread's rough, dense, baked 2 days ago. "At least the rats haven't taken it," he jokes. "Yet," you say, smiling faintly. A group of children run past, chasing each other with sticks. shouting something about knights and dragons. You watch them with tired amusement. They'll learn soon enough. Thomas mutters. You nod. Best to dream while you can. The day drags on, heavy with mud and obligation. The plow sticks, the oxen snort in protest, and every muscle in your body begs for rest. Still, you keep moving. Because not moving means losing everything. By late afternoon, the clouds thin. The light turns golden, the kind that makes even the mud look gentle. You straighten your back, stretching as you look toward the horizon. The world feels wider in this light, softer. You almost forget the steward's face. Almost. Back home, the fire's already lit. The children are laughing. Your wife's teaching them how to twist straw into rope. You watch for a moment before stepping in. The warmth hits you immediately, thick and smoky. She looks up, smiling faintly. You're soaked again. It's the weather's fault, you say. It's always the weather's fault. She ladles out stew into 2 bowls. Thin, but fragrant with leeks and barley. You eat slowly, savoring each bite like it's something sacred. Outside, the rain finally stops, leaving the world damp and still. You lean back against the wall, bowl empty, and let your eyes drift shut. The fire crackles. The children whisper. Somewhere outside, the wind brushes past the thatch like a sigh. You think of the steward again, of the manor's towers gleaming faintly in the distance. For all his power, you realize he doesn't know what this feels like. This tiny, fragile piece at the end of an endless day. You might not own the land, but for now, you own this moment. The warmth, the laughter, the simple relief of having survived another dawn. To dusk. And in the quiet, you murmur a small, defiant thought you'd never dare say aloud. Let the lords have their gold. You'll keep your dirt. The next morning begins with frost. Not the pretty kind that sparkles on the grass. This one bites through cloth and bone, creeping up your fingers before you've even stepped outside. You wrap a strip of linen around your palms, though it does little more than mock the idea of warmth. Your tools wait for you by the shed, lined up like old, wounded soldiers. The wooden plow leans against the wall, its frame cracked where you mended it last spring, with a strip of iron scavenged from a broken pot. The hoe has a splintering handle. The sickle's edge is dull enough to butter bread with, and yet they're your lifeline. You shoulder the plow and trudge toward the field, the frost crunching beneath your boots. The oxen snort clouds of steam as you yoke them up. Their ribs show more than you'd like, but they're still strong, stronger than you some days. The soil's stiff with cold, reluctant to turn. Each furrow you drag open feels like a negotiation between willpower and exhaustion. The plow jerks, the oxen grunt, your back screams. The iron tip catches on a buried rock, jolting the handle hard enough to split the skin on your thumb. You hiss through your teeth and suck at the wound. Blood tastes like rust. You look at your hands. They're not really hands anymore. They're collections of cuts, blisters, and calluses layered like bark. Sometimes you dream about what your father's hands must have looked like before the fields claimed them, and wonder if yours will end the same way, crooked, cracked, forgotten. A while later, Thomas joins you again, dragging his own plow. Blade snapped this morning, he mutters. Had to borrow from the cooper's brother. You glance over. Lucky he had one. Lucky he wanted to lend it. Thomas spits. Said I could pay him back in barley. As if I've any to spare. You keep working, side by side, your conversation trailing off into the rhythm of creaking wood and squelching mud. By midday, the frost has melted into a sluggish, wet sludge. You stop to drink from a leather flask, lukewarm water, tasting faintly of the cow it came from. Thomas eyes your plow. That thing looks older than St. Peter. You grin weakly. Might have been his too. He laughs, short and low. The kind of laugh people make when they're too tired for anything louder. Across the field, a small crowd's gathered around one of the newer plows. An iron, shud model brought in by the reeve for the manor's own fields. It slices through the earth smooth as butter, turning the soil in neat, perfect lines. You pause to watch, envy coiling quietly in your chest. You'll never touch one of those. Not unless the Lord decides peasants suddenly deserve efficiency. Thomas notices your gaze. Don't bother dreaming, he says flatly. They'd sooner bless a horse than lend that to us. You shrug. Still, imagine how easy it'd be. He snorts. And imagine warm bread every morning while you're at it. You both go back to work. The day stretches endlessly. Your shoulders ache. The rope around the oxen rubs your palms raw. The plow blade wobbles loose twice, and each time you kneel in the cold muck to hammer it back into place with a rock. At one point, your youngest wanders into the field carrying a bundle of rushes for the house. She's barefoot, her feet pale and caked with dirt. Duh, she calls. Ma says come eat. You wipe your brow. Tell her I'll finish this row first. She nods solemnly and skips off, humming to herself. You watch her go, feeling a mix of love and guilt heavy enough to bend your spine further than the plow ever could. When you finally stop for the meal, the stew's thin but hot. Your wife hands you the bowl, her fingers cracked and red from scrubbing linen in icy water. You eat without words. There's comfort in the silence, in knowing the same weariness sits in both your bones. Later, as the sun begins to sink, you find yourself mending the plow again by torchlight. The iron plate's warped, you hammer it flat on a stone, sparks jumping like angry fireflies. Your wife watches from the doorway. You'll wear yourself out, she says softly. You shrug. If I stop, it'll break. Then we've got nothing, she sighs. You always say that, and it's always true. The hammering echoes across the field, hollow, rhythmic, lonely. It's a sound that could belong to any century, really. When you finally stop, your arms are trembling. You look at the plow one last time and murmur, that'll hold till spring, maybe. She hands you a cup of ale. Maybe. She echoes and sits beside you. For a moment, neither of you speak. The stars are just beginning to prick through the fading blue. It's easy, in this quiet, to forget how fragile it all is. The plow, the harvest, the thin thread tying survival to labor. But, you always know. You sip the ale, let it burn your throat, and stare into the dark fields stretching out before you. The earth sleeps, but not kindly, and tomorrow you'll wake it again. With splinters in your palms, with cracked tools, with the stubborn grace of those who have no choice but to keep going. The next morning greets you not with light, but with noise, the kind that makes the roof creak and your breath catch. Rain, not the soft, musical kind that poets pretend to love, but a relentless downpour that turns everything you own into mud. The thatch above your bed drips in slow, methodical beats. Plop, plop, plop. You pull your blanket, if you can still call it that, closer around your shoulders. It smells of damp straw and smoke. Your wife's already up, muttering under her breath as she moves a bucket to catch the leak. Third one this week, she sighs. You grunt in reply, because what else is there to say? The cottage was never meant to be waterproof. More a polite suggestion of shelter than an actual barrier. You drag yourself up, feet sinking into the cold dirt floor. The fire's gone out overnight. You kneel, blow on the embers, and coax a reluctant flame back to life. It flickers weakly, like it too would rather stay in bed. Outside, the rain hammers harder. The sound is almost hypnotic. You could almost fall back asleep to it, if it weren't for the creeping dread in your gut. Rain means flooding. Flooding means ruined crops. Ruined crops mean hunger. You step outside anyway, because you don't have the luxury of waiting for clear skies. The field stretches before you like a soaked graveyard. Furrows drowned, seedlings flattened. The soil turned to a black soup that sucks at your boots. The oxen look miserable, huddled by the fence with their hides slicked dark. One of them sneezes, which seems both pitiful and vaguely human. You trudge to the field's edge and jab your boot into the mud. Water pools instantly. "We're done for," you mutter. Behind you, Thomas's voice answers through the rain. "Aye, same on my side. God's got a cruel sense of humour." You look over. He's wrapped in a ragged cloak that's soaked through. His hair's plastered to his forehead. His plough stands useless in the muck. "Maybe it'll clear by midday," you offer, though the sky looks like an ink stain that'll never wash out. Thomas snorts. "Or maybe he's washing us away." You both laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's that, or cry. Hours pass. The rain never lets up. Your fingers prune from the wet. Your shoulders ache from shoveling trenches that do nothing to drain the water. You dig anyway. It's what a farmer does. Keep fighting the losing battle against the weather, pretending it's still worth the effort. By noon, the fields are lake. You can't tell where the furrows end and the path begins. Somewhere beneath the murk lie the first shoots of barley you planted last week. They'll never see daylight again. You head home, clothes plastered to your skin, boots squelching. Inside, your wife's wringing out a bundle of laundry with a look that could curdle milk. "Flooding again?" she asks. You nod. Then the barley's gone. You nod again. For a moment, she just stands there, staring into the fire. Then, with quiet resignation, she says, "We'll have to stretch what we've got left. Maybe the wheat'll hold." She gives you a look that says even you don't believe that. You sit by the fire, letting the steam rise off your clothes. The room smells of wet wool and wood smoke. Outside, the rain keeps on, steady and cruel. Historians still argue whether the so-called Little Ice Age began in your lifetime or a century later. But standing here, watching your year's labour drown, it hardly matters what they call it. To you, it's just bad weather, same as your father faced, and his before him. That night, the rain turns to wind. The thatch rattles. The door shudders in its frame. You lie awake, listening to the cottage groan like a tired old man. Then, just as you start to drift off, the sound changes. Sharper, colder. You sit up. Snow. By morning, the world's white. The fields that were drowning yesterday are now frozen under a thin crust of ice. You step outside and crunch through it, every step echoing in the stillness. It's beautiful in a cruel sort of way. Sunlight glinting off the frost, the trees gleaming like glass. But beauty doesn't fill bellies. The oxen's water trough is frozen solid. You crack it with an axe, the sound splitting the quiet like thunder. The animals drink greedily. You wish you could do the same. Thomas appears again, as he always does. "Well," he says, "at least it's not raining." You laugh. A dry, brittle laugh. "Aye. Now it's just frozen misery. Better than drowning." Barely. The two of you stand there, breath fogging the air, watching the frozen fields. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings, faint, muffled by snow. "Reckon he's testing us," Thomas says finally. "Reckon he's bored." Thomas grins. "Careful, you'll get smote for that." You shrug. If he hasn't yet, he's not paying attention. By midday, the snow begins to melt, and the ground beneath turns to slush. You can already smell the rot where the crops drowned. The year's work, undone by a week of weather. Later, sitting by the fire again, you stare into the flames. You think about how everything, all the toil, all the prayer, all the aching mornings, can be erased by the sky's whim. You think about how, when the Lord's harvest fails, he just raises taxes. When yours fails, your children starve. It's an unfair world, but it's the only one you've got. And so, When dawn comes again, and the rain starts up once more, you pull on your boots and step into it without hesitation. Because surviving isn't about hope, it's about stubbornness. You whisper to the storm, "Do your worst." And it does. The rain finally breaks, but the air that follows feels heavy, damp and close, like the sky hasn't decided whether to forgive you or finish what it started. You rise early, sore from the past day's work and weather, and trudge down the track toward the village. Your boots stick in the muck. The smell of smoke and manure greets you long before the sight of the cottages does. The village isn't large, just a scatter of thatched roofs, a crooked well, and a few chickens running loose with more confidence than most people here. You've come for salt, though truthfully, you're craving gossip almost as much. News travels like mud, thick, slow, and irresistible. At the well, Agnes, the brewer's wife, is already holding court, her voice sharp enough to cut through the morning haze. "I'm telling you," she says, "it wasn't just a fever. Old Martha saw lights above his house the night before he took ill. Strange ones, blue and dancing." You pause, pretending to fuss with your bucket. "Lights," you say. Agnes turns toward you, eyes wide, thrilled to have an audience. "Oi!" "Which is lights," she says, "or spirits?" And then the poor man coughs his lungs out and dies in 2 days. "You can't tell me that's just bad luck." You nod solemnly. Terrible business, that. But blue lights might have just been swamp gas. Swamp gas, she repeats, incredulous. And what would you know of that? You grin. Enough to know it's less deadly than a witch. A few others chuckle, though not too loudly. You never know when a joke about witchcraft will stop being funny and start being evidence. The gossip moves on quickly, as it always does. Someone swears the Reeves' daughter was caught sneaking bread to a beggar. A crime so small yet so dangerous, it could cost her father a fine. Someone else mutters about strange hoofprints, found near the churchyard. Another insists a travelling friar predicted an early frost and a late harvest, which is to say, the same thing every friar predicts. You listen, half amused, half uneasy. In a place like this, talk has a life of its own. Words can sour reputations, ruin livelihoods, even get people killed if the wrong rumour reaches the manor. "Morning," says a familiar voice. It's Thomas again, carrying a basket of eggs. "Come to fetch supplies or stories?" "Both," you admit. "Seems the stories are fresher." He smirks. "Aye, and less filling." You both head toward the blacksmith's hut, where the smell of iron and sweat mixes with the faint sweetness of roasted barley. The smith's hammer rings out, bright and rhythmic, a sound that makes the village feel almost alive. He glances up as you approach. "What brings you two muddy saints my way?" "Need a nail for my plow handle," you say. The old one snapped. He snorts. "So did half the tools in the parish after that rain. Be lucky if I can keep up." While he works, the talk continues. Small, harmless chatter that never stays harmless for long. Someone swears they saw a wolf near the mill. Someone else says the miller's wife has been smiling too kindly at the tanner. Everyone laughs, but their eyes dart, just in case she's behind them. It's a strange comfort, this constant exchange of half-truths. It keeps people connected in a way no church sermon ever could. Every whisper is a reminder that you belong, even if what you belong to is mostly mud and misfortune. By midday, the gossip has drifted toward the tavern, where the ale is thin, but the talk thickens. You and Thomas find yourselves sitting on the bench outside, sipping mugs of the brewer's latest batch. Bitter, warm, and faintly smoky, like everything in this village. A group of men argue nearby about the new taxes. "They'll bleed us dry," one says. "First they take 1/10 for the church, now another 1/10 for the king's wars." "What war? Haven't seen one come through here." Not yet, says another darkly. But give them time. Thomas shakes his head. They'll find one. Always do. You chuckle. At least the gossip's cheaper. The tavern door swings open and Agnes reappears, triumphant. I heard from the Reeve's own wife. She says the Lord's cousin is visiting next week. Might stay the night at the manor. A murmur runs through the crowd. A noble visitor means noise, inspection, and trouble, all dressed up as honor. Wonderful, Thomas mutters. We can all stand in a line and look grateful. Maybe they'll fix the road while they're here. You offer. He laughs. And maybe pigs will fly to market. You spend the afternoon hauling grain to the mill. The gossip now reduced to background noise, like birdsong, if birds gossiped about taxes and witchcraft. The wheel turns slow, its creak matching the rhythm of your thoughts. Historians still argue whether rural villages like yours were truly as insular and suspicious as the records suggest, or whether scribes simply exaggerated the strangeness of common folk. Standing here, ankle deep in gossip and mud, you think the answer's probably both. People cling to stories the way they cling to hope, fiercely, foolishly, and without apology. When the sun dips, you walk home past cottages glowing faintly through the fog. Laughter filters out from one, singing from another. A child cries, a dog barks, someone coughs deep in the distance. The world feels very small, and yet somehow endless. Your wife meets you at the door, hands dusted with flour. Did you hear, she asks, about the Lord's cousin coming? You sigh. I did. The whole village did. She shakes her head. Then I'd best mend your tunic. You smile faintly. If he's noble enough, he'll look past the holes. She gives you that look again. The one that means, don't test me, and you wisely close your mouth. As the night settles, you sit by the fire, listening to the rain return, light and steady. The gossip of the day lingers in your mind like smoke, silly, petty, alive. In a world where the weather and the Lord can both destroy you without warning, perhaps gossip is the only thing you can control, a way to feel powerful by pretending you know something others don't. You close your eyes, drifting towards sleep. Tomorrow there will be new stories, new worries, new whispers swirling through the muddy heart of the village. And you'll be right there again, listening, because in a place where silence feels like death, talk is its own kind of survival. By the time the Lord's cousin comes and goes, leaving behind muddy boot prints, a few polite nods, and not much else, the rhythm of village life resumes its uneven heartbeat. The fields still need tending, the animals still bleat for feed, and the weather, as ever, refuses to cooperate. But today is different. Today is a feast day. Not that feast means quite what you'd wish. It's St. Martin's Day, when the church insists on celebration before the long, lean stretch of winter fasting. The village has been buzzing all week gossip, music, borrowed ribbons. The faint thrill of knowing there'll be a break, however brief, from the gnawing sameness of toil. You wake to the smell of roasting goose drifting across the fields, smoke curling up from a dozen hearths. You grin despite yourself. Smells like heaven. You tell your wife. Smells like someone else's goose. She replies dryly, stirring a pot of barley pottage. Still, she hums as she works. The melody soft and old, the kind passed down through too many winters to count. When you step outside, the air hums with life. Children run barefoot through puddles, chasing one another with sticks. The bell at the church tower rings lazily. Thomas waves from the road, already halfway into a grin. Feast day, he shouts. And I've washed my hands. Both of them, you laugh. Careful, you'll start a trend. Down in the village green, the people are gathering, a colourful, ragged crowd. Even the Reeve looks almost cheerful, which is unsettling. Tables have been dragged out, bread, cheese, and I'll line them like treasures. You join the crush, cup in hand. Someone passes you a hunk of bread thick with lard. You tear into it without ceremony. It tastes like salt, smoke, and something dangerously close to happiness. A fiddler starts up, his bow squeaking but enthusiastic. The sound is raw, but it moves people. Even the old ones tap their feet. Historians still argue whether peasants in medieval England were as dour and downtrodden as the chronicles suggest, or whether moments like this, noisy, messy, defiant joy, were more common than we assume. Watching the villagers laugh and dance in the mud, you'd think joy was their only form of rebellion. Thomas grabs your arm. "Come on then, dance! You look too clean!" You protest, weakly, but he's already dragging you into the circle. The dance is less choreography, more survival, a flurry of stomping, clapping, spinning until the world blurs. You nearly trip over a dog. A child shrieks with laughter. Someone pours ale down your sleeve, and you don't even care. For a few hours you forget. You forget the mud, the taxes, the way your stomach often knots before bed. The music wipes it all away. You're just another body moving under the same sky, laughing until your sides hurt. Then the priest arrives. The laughter fades a little as he steps into the green, robes fluttering, expression severe enough to curdle cream. He lifts a hand, not in blessing but warning. "Remember, my children," he intones, "joy must not lead to sin. Drink, but do not fall. Feast, but do not forget the hungry. And give thanks, for the Lord sees all." A murmur of polite amens ripples through the crowd. You and Thomas exchange a glance that says, "He always sees, never helps." Still, the priest's presence does little to dampen spirits. As dusk falls, torches are lit. Someone brings out a pie, actual meat, not the usual turnip disguise. It disappears in minutes. Someone else brings a jug of stronger ale, and that's when the real stories begin. You hear tales of saints who tamed bears, of ghosts who guard crossroads, of a man who once wrestled the devil and won, though only because the devil slipped in cow dung. You find yourself laughing harder than you have in months. Your wife's cheeks glow in the torchlight, her eyes bright despite the smoke. She leans in and whispers, "You should laugh like this more often." "Maybe I would," you say, "if we had goose every day." She swats your arm. "You'd be too lazy to plow." "Then I'd die smiling." Later, the oil runs out, and the fiddler's arm trembles with exhaustion. The torches burn low. The stars come out, cold and sharp. One by one, people drift back to their cottages, singing half-forgotten hymns and off-key love songs. You walk home arm in arm with your wife, the night air sweet with smoke and wet grass. The world feels, for a brief and impossible moment, kind, but the next morning, the kindness ends. The barrels are empty. The bread's gone. The scraps left behind are stale before noon. You wake with a headache and a hollow belly. The feast day has passed. Famine day has arrived. Winter's scent is already in the air. Wood smoke, rot, cold. The frost creeps back across the thatch. The hens stop laying. The oxen's ribs show through their hides. You scrape the last of the barley from the jar. It makes a thin gruel, hardly worth the firewood it costs to boil. Maybe Thomas has some left. Your wife says quietly. You shake your head. He hasn't. No one does. The feast has left everyone lighter, in spirit and in supply. Still, you can't quite resent it. Those few hours of warmth and laughter feel like a dream now, but a necessary one. You think of it as a kind of shield, a memory to pull close when the wind howls and the stomach gnaws. As the days shorten, the joy drains from the village. Conversations shrink, smiles become rationed. Even the gossip turns grey. Stories of illness, debt, missing animals. The priest reminds everyone to be grateful. The Lord provides, he says. You nod politely but think, he must have lost our address. The fields sleep now, buried in frost. You spend more time mending, plows, boots, fences, anything that can distract from hunger. The world feels quieter, smaller, as if holding its breath. And yet, sometimes, when the wind dies down and the fire crackles just right, you hear echoes of the feast laughter, like the rustle of dry leaves. Music faint as a heartbeat. You hold on to that sound the way others hold on to faith. Because in the end, that's what keeps you alive here. Not the food, not the land, but the memory that, once in a while, you were allowed to be human. The first frost was a warning. The second, a threat. By the third, winter had bared its teeth. It begins not with a storm, but a silence. The kind that settles like a heavy cloth over the world. The birds vanish first. Then the last green flecks of grass turn brittle and grey. Even the river slows, its voice muffled beneath a thin skin of ice. Your breath hangs in the air as you walk the field, now hard as stone. The plough lies useless, half buried in frost. The furrows you once carved are just faint scars now. You tap the ground with your boot. It sounds like knocking on a coffin. Thomas joins you, hands jammed under his arms. "Feels colder this year," he says. You grunt. "Feels colder every year." He laughs, though there's no joy in it. We say that every year too. The two of you stand there for a while, watching a crow pick at something frozen. You don't ask what it is. The bird's feathers puff up against the cold, black as ink against the pale field. "Reckon will last till spring?" Thomas asks finally. You look at him. He's smiling again, but this time it's thin. A habit more than a mood. "We always do," you say. "Mostly." He nods, then stamps his feet. "Best head back before my toes freeze off. Can't dance at St. Valentine's without toes." You almost tell him there won't be a St. Valentine's feast this year. The grain stores are too low. The priest already muttering about penance and humility. But you keep quiet. Let him have his joke. Let both of you have something. Back home, the hearth smokes but doesn't heat. Your wife kneels beside it, coaxing flame from damp kindling. The children sit wrapped in old cloaks, too tired to squabble. "Nothing left to burn but the bench," she says, half serious. You glance at it, sturdy oak, polished by years of use. "Maybe start with the priest's chair first." She snorts. "You'd go to hell for that." "Only if he catches me." That earns a smile. Small victories. Outside, the snow begins to fall. Slow at first, then faster, until the air is thick with it. You watch through the cracked shutter as the world disappears. Fences, paths, footprints, all swallowed in white. It's beautiful in a cruel way. The way an empty plate is beautiful if you're starving. The next morning, everything creaks. The snow lies knee-deep, smooth as cloth, but beneath it lurks ice. The chickens are silent. One lies stiff in the coop, its feathers rimed in frost. You bury it near the hedge without ceremony. Food for spring foxes, maybe. Days blend together. The fire burns low, the air sharp enough to sting your lungs. You learn to sleep in layers. Cloak, blanket, hope. You learn the sound of hunger, too not the growl of an empty belly, but the quiet that follows it, when even the body gives up complaining. At night, you dream of bread. Not warm bread or soft bread, just bread. Anything that fills the mouth, that feels solid. You wake to the taste of ashes instead. The priest preaches patience. Suffering, he says, is the forge of the soul. You think privately that your soul must be near molten by now. The Lord's hall glows across the valley, its windows leaking golden light. You imagine roast meat, laughter, wine, all the warmth hoarded behind stone walls. Once, that would have made you angry. Now, it just feels distant, like remembering summer. Thomas visits one evening, cheeks raw from wind. He brings a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Got this from the miller," he says. Said it's barley flour. Might be mostly sawdust, though. You open it, and the smell confirms it's mostly wishful thinking. Still, you thank him. What'd you trade for it? 2 eggs. You glance toward the coop. We don't even have 2 eggs to give back. He shrugs. Neither did I. You share a look that says everything words can't. A mix of humor, pity, and the kind of understanding that only comes from starving together. That night, you boil the flour into paste. It sticks to the pot and to your ribs equally. But the children lick their bowls clean, and for a moment, that's enough. Weeks crawl past. The sky stays grey. The air tastes like iron. One by one, people fall ill. Coughs that rattle, fevers that burn. The priest prays louder, the doctor visits less. When Thomas stops coming by, you know before anyone says it aloud. You find his cottage dark, the door ajar. His wife sits inside, hands folded in her lap, eyes red and dry. She doesn't speak, just nods once. You leave what little you have, a crust, a candle, and walk home through the snow, feeling smaller than you ever have. The village bell tolls the next morning. Once, twice, then silence. You sit by the fire, staring at the wall. Your wife's voice cuts softly through the stillness. He made it longer than most would have. You nod. He'd be cross if he knew he missed spring. She says nothing. That night, you dream again. But this time, it's not bread you see. It's the feast day, the laughter, the dancing in mud.
You hear Thomas shouting, "Come on, dance!"
You almost do. But when you reach for him, he's gone. You wake before dawn, the room cold, your breath a ghost in the air. Outside, the horizon glows faintly pink. Snow sparkles in that strange, soft light, the kind that means the season's grip is breaking. You step outside. The frost bites, but the wind has shifted. You can smell change, like damp soil under the ice. The crows are back. You whisper a prayer, not to the priest's god, but to the earth itself. Let it thaw. Let us live. The sun climbs higher. The snow begins to weep. And for the first time in months, the world sounds alive again. You wake to the sound of coughing. Not the little mourning kind. The kind that sounds like a person's lungs are trying to escape. It echoes from the next cottage over, then another. A grim choir in the morning fog. You lie still for a moment, letting the sound settle. You've learned not to flinch at it. Everyone's coughing these days. It's the rhythm of winter, the drumbeat of cold and damp. When you finally sit up, your throat burns. Smoke curls low in the cottage. The fire, too, is coughing. Your wife is already up, stirring something in a pot that smells faintly of onion and despair. Good morning. You manage. She glances over her shoulder, red-eyed, but smiling anyway. Morning. Don't breathe too deep. It's mostly smoke. You chuckle weakly. Better than breathing the air outside. That's true enough. The air out there feels thick, heavy with sickness. The priest says it's miasma, bad air that carries death. The village doctor, when he shows up sober, says it's humors out of balance. And the old widow down the lane says it's punishment for too much dancing last summer. Historians still argue whether the peasants of your time truly believed in bad air or in divine wrath, but you don't have much energy to debate theology. Whatever it is, it's killing people faster than hunger ever did. You take your place at the fire, trying to rub warmth into your hands. The cough catches in your chest again. You think of Thomas, gone only a few weeks now, and wonder if this is how it started for him. Your wife pours a ladle of stew into a wooden bowl and hands it over. Eat slow, she says. The turnips pretending to be meat again. You smile. It's getting good at it. It's a small meal, but it's food. You sip the broth and let it slide down your sore throat. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, carrying the smell of damp straw and wood smoke. By noon, the village feels smaller. The children are kept indoors, their laughter replaced by coughing fits. Dogs roam quiet, scavenging for scraps. Even the blacksmith's hammer sounds duller, slower. You head to the field anyway, out of habit more than hope. The snow has receded just enough to expose the frost-bitten earth beneath. You kneel and dig your fingers into it. Cold, dead, waiting. A shadow falls over you. It's Matthew, the Reeve's son, bundled in a fur that probably came from some lord's forgotten store. Father says no one should be working, he says. The sickness spreads through sweat. You glance up at him. Then tell your father I'll stop sweating when my rent stops coming due. He frowns. You shouldn't talk like that. Neither should he. The boy opens his mouth, thinks better of it, and walks away. You watch him go, boots crunching in the frost. For a second, you envy him. The warmth, the certainty, the clean hands. Then you shake your head. Certainty doesn't keep anyone alive for long. When you return home, the priest is outside your door. His cloak is heavy, his expression heavier. My child, he says softly, I hear you've not been at Mass. You nod. Been busy living. He doesn't smile. The soul must be tended as much as the field. You want to tell him the field is dead, that your soul will have to wait its turn. But something in his eyes stops you. He looks tired. Scared even. There's talk. He continues. That this illness comes from sin, greed, envy. Sloth. You shrug. Could be. I've got all three. He sighs. For your family. When he's gone, your wife whispers, do you think it's really sin? You look around the cottage. Cracked walls, threadbare blankets, half-empty pot. If this is sin, it's a boring one. That night, you dream of heat. A fever, or maybe summer, it's hard to tell. You're sweating, but not cold anymore. Someone's voice, your mother's, maybe, tells you to drink. You reach for water, but it turns to ash in your hand. You wake to find the room dark, your wife's hand on your forehead. You're burning, she murmurs. You try to speak, but the words break apart in your throat. The cough returns, wet and raw. She holds a cloth to your mouth, and when she pulls it away, there's blood on it. You both stare. Neither of you says anything. The days blur after that. You drift between sleep and pain. The priest visits again, muttering prayers that sound more frightened than holy. He presses a charm into your wife's palm, a small cross wrapped in string. Keep it near him, he says. The devil hates knots. When he leaves, she ties it around your wrist. Can't hurt, she says, but it doesn't help much either. On the third day, an old woman comes by, the kind everyone calls a witch, but still invites when things get bad. She smells of herbs and vinegar. She peers into your eyes, presses your chest, nods once.
Lungs are heavy,
She says. Too much damp. Needs fire. Fire. Your wife repeats. The woman grins, showing 2 yellow teeth. Hot poultice. Mustard onion lard. Draw it out. You groan, but she's already mixing things in a bowl. Soon. The cottage smells like a kitchen gone wrong. The paste is warm when she spreads it on your chest, then burning. You gasp. That's working, she says. Maybe it is. The fever breaks 2 days later, though your body feels hollow, scraped clean from the inside. When you can stand again, you shuffle outside. The sun feels strange, bright, too sharp. The snow is gone now, replaced by mud that sucks at your boots. Spring has arrived, but the village hasn't celebrated. Too many gone. Too many beds left cold. You find Thomas's widow tending her garden. She smiles faintly when she sees you. He'd be glad you made it, she says. You nod, voice rough. He'd tell me to stop being lazy and start sewing. She laughs, and it sounds almost normal. That evening, you sit by the fire with your wife. The children sleep, their breaths shallow but steady. Outside, frogs croak in the thawing marsh. You listen, half in disbelief. Do you think it's over? She asks quietly. You stare at the flames. For now. There's comfort in that. Not hope, exactly, but something smaller and sturdier. Like the first green sprout, pushing through frozen soil. You close your eyes and let the sound of the fire fill the room. The world is still cruel, still hungry, but for the first time in months, it's also alive. The air finally smells of life again. Wet grass, thawed soil, and the faint sweetness of cow dung steaming in the morning sun. You'd forgotten what warmth felt like when it came from the sky instead of the hearth. You stretch outside the cottage, the stiffness in your back protesting like an old mule. Somewhere down the lane, a rooster crows 3 times too many, proud and ridiculous. You smile despite yourself. After months of cold and coughing, that sound feels like a hymn. Your wife leans out from the doorway, apron tied, hair in a loose knot. The pig got into the cabbages again. You sigh. Let him. He's the only one who eats like a lord around here. Don't say that, she says, though her lips twitch. The priest might hear. You glance toward the church steeple, crooked against the morning fog. If he's listening this far, he can come help chase it. She laughs and goes back inside. The fields call to you, brown, soft, and newly alive. The earth has thawed enough to dig again, which means it's time to work before it hardens once more. Every farmer in the village knows the same rhythm plow. So pray, repeat. You grip the wooden handle of your plow and start turning the soil. The smell of dirt, real dirt, not frozen mud, feels like forgiveness. Behind you, your youngest hums a little tune, following your furrow lines and tossing stones aside. He's small, but eager, maybe too eager. Careful, boy, you say, that rock's older than the king. He grins, missing 2 teeth. Then it owes us rent. You chuckle, sweat already gathering on your brow. For a moment, life feels simple again. Back breaking, sure, but familiar. The ache in your hands is almost comforting, proof that you're still here, still working, still human. When the sun climbs higher, your neighbor Edith passes by with her basket of washing. You look better, farmer, she calls. Did the witch fix you, or curse you? Both, you say. Haven't decided which I prefer. Ask your wife, she snorts, disappearing down toward the stream. Love, in your world, doesn't come dressed in poems or silk. It's a quiet thing. Shared chores, silent glances. The way she leaves the last crust for you. There's no time for serenades when every hour is a wrestle with survival. Still, there are moments. That night, after the children fall asleep, you sit outside with her, the stars bright as spilled salt across the sky. The spring air hums with crickets, and somewhere far off, a wolf howls. She leans against your shoulder, silent. Remember when we thought we'd moved to town? She murmurs. You smile faintly. And be what? Beggars with manners. You'd look good in a hat. You laugh quietly, shaking your head. I'd look like a farmer pretending to be a hat. She sighs. Maybe. But at least you'd be warm. You look at her. The lines near her eyes. The smudge of dirt on her cheek. The strength in her hands. You don't say it aloud. But she's the reason you made it through the winter. Not the priest. Not the plow. Not luck. Her. The next morning, you wake to laughter outside. The village is gathering for St. George's Day, one of the few times when Toil pauses for song. Ribbons, owl, and dancing. Brief rebellion against the grind of life. Your wife tugs at your sleeve. Go. You've earned a dance. You protest, but she pushes you out the door anyway. Down in the green, people circle the maypole. Children chase each other with wildflowers, and for once, nobody's coughing. The fiddler plays something uneven but joyful. You see Edith again, already flushed from dancing. Come on, she shouts. You survived the plague.
Now survive the real!
You join in, awkward at first. Your boots slip in the mud, but laughter carries you. The music loops and loops, the same notes spinning into something almost hypnotic. You lose track of time, of aches, of worries. For the first time in months, you forget you're poor. Later, you and the others share weak ale. That tastes stronger than it is. The talk turns to marriages. Who's courting whom? Who shouldn't be? Who already is and won't admit it? A boy not much older than your son boasts. "I'll marry before harvest." Someone replies. "To who?" He grins. "Whichever girl can bake bread that doesn't fight back." You nearly choke laughing. Then you'll be a bachelor forever. The laughter feels good, raw, honest. Even the Lord's steward, passing by on horseback, doesn't dampen the mood. He just watches for a while, shaking his head, maybe wishing he could dance too. As the sun sets, you walk home slow. Your wife meets you at the gate, eyebrow raised. "Enjoy yourself?" "Almost died of happiness," you say. Then you're due a rest. But there's no real rest. The sewing must be finished, the thatch repaired, the tools mended. You fall into the rhythm again. Plow, eat, sleep, wake. The days blur together, but in the blur there's peace. Then, one night, as you're patching a hole in the roof, you hear her singing softly below. A lullaby to the youngest. You stop working and listen. Her voice is rough, but it carries. It sounds like something ancient, older than all the kings and priests combined. You realize then that love, for people like you, isn't a word at all. It's a sound, a smell, a warmth on a cold morning. It's knowing that when you wake up tomorrow, hungry, sore, uncertain, she'll be there too, cursing at the chickens and laughing at your jokes. You smile to yourself, hammer in hand. As the stars blink above, the roof can wait till morning. Tonight, the world feels almost kind. The next morning begins not with birdsong or bells, but with the steady, anxious creak of wheels on the lane. A cart is coming, slow, deliberate, too early to be friendly. You know that sound by heart. It's the Lord's steward. And that means one thing: the time of tithes and taxes. Your stomach tightens before you've even stood up. The air outside is warm, almost sweet with the smell of damp hay and fresh manure, but it can't disguise the sour taste of dread in your mouth. Across the field, neighbors step out too, faces drawn. Everyone knows. The cart stops at the first cottage. Voices rise, polite at first, then sharp. A goat bleats, unwillingly offered. You turn away before you see which animal is taken next. When they reach your gate, you've already laid out a sack of barley and 3 scrawny chickens. It's not enough, and you know it. The steward, a thick man with clean boots and an expression carved from smugness, looks over your offering. His lordship will find this disappointing, he says. You keep your eyes low. The storm took half the yield, sir. We've stretched what's left. He frowns, glancing at his ledger. Half the yield still yields half the due. You force a polite tone. Then his lordship's due will be half satisfied. For a moment, he stares, unsure if you're joking or insolent. Then he chuckles, which is somehow worse. Careful, farmer. You can't eat pride. He takes 2 chickens and marks something in his book. The ink blot looks like blood. As the cart rolls on, your wife appears at your side. He left us one. For now, you say. She sighs. It'll be eggs or hunger. Then, you both stand watching the dust settle behind the departing cart. Somewhere, a crow caws, the sound of something that never pays tax. Later, at the church, Father Anselm preaches about gratitude. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, he says, eyes sweeping the congregation. And blessed are those who still give back. You resist the urge to cough. Not from sickness this time, but disbelief. You glance around, faces blank, hands folded, souls on pause. Everyone is tired. Gratitude has become another kind of labor. After Mass, the priest corners you near the door. I hear the steward was harsh, he says gently. You nod. His lordship's generosity is a cold comfort. He sighs. Perhaps prayer will ease your burden. You smile faintly. Prayer doesn't feed chickens. He doesn't answer, just lays a hand on your shoulder, heavy, practiced, and walks away. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly saw their suffering as divine order or quiet injustice, but living it, you know it's a blend of both. You curse heaven one day and beg its mercy the next. Faith isn't belief, it's endurance dressed up nice. When you return home, your wife has the accounts spread on the table. A few coins, a chipped cup of salt, 2 loaves gone stale. It's not enough, she says simply. It never is, you reply. She looks up. Do you think they know? The lords? Yes. Do you think they know what it's like? You think of their stone halls, their feasts, their silken robes that never touch dirt. They know, you say. They just don't care. That evening, you mend your tools in silence. The sickle edge glints dully in the candlelight, more rust than shine. Your son sits nearby, carving a stick into something that might one day resemble a whistle. Why does the Lord need so much? He asks suddenly. You pause. Because someone told him he does. Who told him? Someone who wanted him to stop asking questions. He frowns, thinking hard, then nods slowly. So, if I stop asking questions, I can have everything too. You laugh, shaking your head. No, boy. You'll just stop noticing what you don't have. The next day, the talk in the village is of rebellion. Quiet, dangerous talk. In the tavern, over sour ale, a few men whisper about the next shire over, where farmers refuse to pay. They say the steward ran home crying, one says. Another replies. They also say the soldiers came back and burned the place down. The laughter that follows isn't joy, it's armor. You sip your ale, thinking of fields gone fallow, families gone missing, and wonder which is worse, obedience or hope. On your way home you pass the mill. The miller, always cleverer than most, waves from the doorway. You've still got your hands, he says. That's more than some can say after arguing with tacksmen. You nod. Hands don't fill bowls. True, he says, tossing you a small sack of grain. But they can take what's left. You blink. What's this? He grins. Call it a miracle. If the priest asks, you thank him, though you know better than to question his generosity. He'll collect his favor one day. They always do. That night, you share the bread. It's coarse, heavy, beautiful. The children eat in silence, crumbs clinging to their fingers. When it's gone, your wife murmurs, we'll owe him for this. You nod. Better to owe the miller than the grave. Outside, the stars are faint, smothered by mist. You sit at the door, staring at the sky. The weight of rent, tithes, and obligation presses on you like an invisible yoke. You imagine all of England hunched beneath it, millions of backs bent together. And yet, the frogs still sing, the wheat still grows, the sun still rises. The world carries on indifferent, but dependable. Maybe that's enough. Tomorrow, you'll plow again. Tomorrow, the steward will come again. Tomorrow, the priest will preach again. And somehow, you'll keep surviving all three. Winter does not arrive all at once. It creeps. It starts with the breath misting from your lips in the dawn air. The way the soil hardens, just enough to resist your spade. Then the frost comes for the thatch, for the fields, for the bones. Soon, even the river's voice grows hoarse under its new skin of ice. You and your wife patch what you can leaks, torn cloaks, hopes. There is no real warmth, only layers, of cloth, of worry, of quiet acceptance. The nights grow long enough to make you forget the sun. Your children cough more now, the sound hollow and constant. You boil herbs, muttering half. Remembered charms your mother once whispered when sickness was near. The scent of rosemary and smoke fills the cottage, half healing, half illusion. One morning, you find the cat frozen stiff by the door. You bury it behind the shed, quick and wordless. Your son asks if it'll wake up when spring comes. You tell him, maybe. Because lies are easier than truth when the ground is this cold. Food runs thin before the month is done. The bread shrinks, the hunger does not. You stretch the broth with water, add old roots, bark, anything that smells of the earth. Your wife hums softly as she stirs, not out of cheer, but to keep her hands from shaking. Outside, the woods are still. You think of the forest, forbidden to peasants, claimed by the Lord, and of the rabbits that must still move there, plump and warm beneath their fur. That night, when everyone sleeps, you take your snare and your silence. The moon hangs low, a ghostly coin between clouds. You walk carefully, listening for nothing but the crunch of your boots. At the forest edge, you stop. One more step, and you're a poacher. One wrong sound, and you're a corpse. You take the step. The woods breathe differently here. The air smells freer, older, honest. You set the snare near a bramble bush and whisper an apology to the Lord, to God, to the rabbit you hope will not hear it coming. By morning, you return with meat. Small, but enough. Your wife stares at it, then at you. If they find out. They won't, you say. And if they do, we'll say it wandered into our yard. She nods. The lie is as brittle as the ice outside, but it holds. You roast the rabbit in secret. The fat spits in the fire, perfuming the room with an almost holy scent. Your daughter laughs for the first time in weeks. For one night, the world feels merciful again. Later, when the embers fade, you sit by the door and whisper, thanks to nothing in particular. Gratitude feels strange, dangerous even, like a luxury you can't afford but take anyway. The next day, the steward rides through the village again. Not for taxes this time, but for patrol. Too many rumors of poachers. He smiles as if winter has made him kinder. It hasn't. He stops by your gate, eyes flicking to the smoke curling from your chimney. Smells rich, he says. You shrug. Boiled nettles, sir. He sniffs, unconvinced. Nettles, is it? Your wife must be a magician. She's made miracles of less, you reply. He stares a moment longer, then rides on. The hoofbeats fade like a slow heartbeat in the frost. That night, you don't sleep. Every creak of wood, every gust of wind sounds like a knock at the door. When dawn finally comes, you've aged another year in your mind. Still, you rise. You go to the field. What's left of it? And turn the earth, just to remind yourself it's still there. Beneath the frost, you find it sleeping, not dead. Your hands ache, but you smile anyway. The soil remembers spring, even when you don't. By midday, the sun peeks weakly through the clouds, pale as watered milk. You strip off your gloves, press your palms into the thawing dirt, and feel the faintest pulse of warmth. It's not hope. Not yet. But it's something close. In the distance, church bells toll. Someone's died. Someone's always dying. You whisper a prayer without thinking. Not for salvation, but for continuity. That tomorrow, there will still be fields. That tomorrow, there will still be you. The historian who writes this centuries later might note that the average medieval peasant rarely lived past 40. But numbers can't measure endurance. They don't count the 1,000 small miracles. The meals stretched, the winters survived, the laughter stolen from the cold. You are not a statistic. You are the heartbeat that kept history alive long enough for someone else to tell it. And in that, there is a strange kind of victory. The thaw never comes when you expect it to. It teases first, soft drips from the eaves, a day or two of gentler wind, and then retreats again, leaving your world glazed in ice once more. You've learned not to trust the weather, but still, some part of you watches the horizon like a promise. Your hands are cracked, so deeply they bleed when you clench them. You wrap them in old linen strips, stiff with ash and sweat, and keep going. There is no other choice. The sheep, what few survive, look as thin and wary as you. You share your stale bread with them out of habit. Survival here isn't about fairness. It's about pity. A crow perches on your fence post, black against the white, watching you with the calm certainty of something that will outlive you. You mutter, "Find someone else's field to haunt." But it stays. Inside, your wife mends clothes by the fire. The thread she uses is nearly gone, so she knots shorter scraps together, her fingers trembling with the concentration of someone performing surgery on the fabric of life itself. She hums. A tune from her childhood, maybe. You can't remember hearing it before. It sounds older than both of you. When you speak, your voice feels too loud for the silence that winter brings. Any word from the manor. She shakes her head. They say the Lord's son is ill. Some say the plague again. Some say punishment. You nod. Illness has its own politics. The manor's sickness means no rent collection for a while, maybe fewer patrols. But it also means prayers and fear and the whispered thought that death travels downwind. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly trapped or simply resigned. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere between a sigh and a shrug. You go to the barn, though calling it a barn feels generous. It's 4 planks and Faith holding up a roof. Inside, the ox breathes shallowly, ribs showing through its hide. You rub its neck, whisper nonsense. You and me both, eh. It turns its head slightly, eyes dull but alive. That's enough. The day drags by in grey. Noon feels no different from dawn. You chop wood, you fetch water, you patch walls that crumble faster than your patience. Once, the girl from the next cottage passes by. Her mother died last week. Fever. She's maybe 12, but her face has already learned the weight of 30. She carries a bundle of sticks on her back, tied with rope, so frayed it looks like a prayer not yet answered. You offer her a bit of bread. She hesitates, then takes it with both hands and whispers thanks. For a moment, you remember your own daughter at that age, how she used to chase chickens and insist they loved her. You blink the image away before it can sting. At sunset, the sky burns orange, briefly pretending to be kind. The frost glitters like treasure, though you know better than to be fooled by beauty. You trudge home, boots heavy with mud that's more ice than earth. The door creaks open to warmth. Thin, uneven warmth, but enough to make your bones sigh. Your wife smiles faintly. The boy found a turnip in the cellar. Not rotten. You grin back. Feast then. The stew tastes like salt and gratitude. You eat slowly, savouring each mouthful as though it's borrowed time. When you lie down that night, the roof sighs in the wind. You listen to it breathe above you, the house itself alive in its own way. You think, absurdly, of how this roof has seen more winters than you ever will. Your wife turns to you. You think we'll make it to Easter. You pause, then nod. We always do. But the truth sits heavy in your chest. You both know survival isn't guaranteed, just practiced. The next morning, your son runs in shouting.
The road! The snow's melting!
You step outside. It's true. Thin trickles running through the ruts, the first shy smell of wet soil. You close your eyes and breathe it in. That scent is the closest thing to heaven you've ever known. Soon, the mud will return, the fields will wake, and you'll begin again. You almost laugh at the cruelty of it. All this suffering, only to start over. But that's the thing about being a peasant farmer. You don't live by years, you live by seasons. You're not measured in achievements, but in endurance. The mud, when it comes, is ankle deep and merciless. Your back screams, your hands reopen their old wounds, your belly still grumbles. But you keep digging, planting, praying. And one evening, as the first green shoots push through the brown, you feel something like pride. Not joy, not yet, but pride, quiet and tired. The kind that belongs only to those who've known hunger and still found strength to sow again. You look up at the setting sun, at the smoke curling from your neighbour's chimneys. The world looks almost peaceful from here, almost fair. And you think maybe, just maybe, this is what surviving means. Not victory, not comfort, but persistence. You tighten your cloak, shoulder your spade, and walk back toward home. The crow still watches from the fence, unblinking. This time you nod to it. It feels like the world nods back. Spring creeps in quietly, as if afraid to wake the dead. The first green blades push through the soil like cautious fingers testing the air. You kneel in the field, press your hand against the damp earth, and feel it pulse with life again. The frost is gone, replaced by the thick smell of mud and promise. Your wife hangs linens in the wind, their edges snapping like banners of surrender. Your children chase one another between puddles, laughing in that thin, bird-like way that makes even hunger sound far away. It feels good. Not easy, not gentle, but good. You start the day early, the way you always do. Roosters crow from somewhere near the manor, the same arrogant birds that crowed while you starved last winter. You almost admire their nerve. The fields demand everything again. You plant barley, oats, and the hope that this year won't betray you. Every seed you drop feels like a prayer, though you stopped trusting prayers long ago. Your back aches. Your shoulders burn. Sweat mixes with dirt until you look more earth than human. You glance at your neighbors, each one a mirror of exhaustion, all of you bound together by soil and survival. The steward rides past once more, his boots clean as a sin. He calls out, "Good yield this year, I hope." You nod, smiling the way a wolf does when it's cornered. "If God allows," he chuckles. "And if he doesn't, I will." You wait until he's gone before muttering, "I'd rather take my chances with God." Still, you keep working. Because that's what you do. That's what all of you do. At noon, you rest in the shade of your plow. You chew a crust of bread, drink a little ale, and watch the wind ripple through the new shoots like green waves. It's beautiful, achingly, unfairly beautiful. Historians still argue whether peasants truly hated their lives or simply accepted them. Maybe it's both. Maybe hatred and acceptance are just two names for the same endurance. A bee buzzes near your ear, lazy and curious. You wave it off, smiling faintly. Insects, you think, never pay rent. By evening, you return home to find your wife humming again. The song has changed. It sounds lighter now, touched by spring. You join in softly, your voice rough from dust and time. For a moment, you imagine the world as something kind. But the truth hums underneath, steady and cruel. Every year might be your last. A single fever, a bad harvest, a Lord's whim, and everything collapses. You live with that truth as easily as breathing. You tuck your children into straw beds, watch their small chests rise and fall. You wonder if they'll grow old enough to complain about back pain and bad bread. You hope so. When you step outside, the night is alive again. Frogs croak near the river, owls call from the woods. The air smells like rain, and your lungs welcome it greedily. You think of your father, buried beneath the oak behind the cottage. Of your mother, gone before your first harvest. You whisper their names, not to summon them, but to remind the world you still remember. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of tilled soil and wood smoke. It smells like everything you've ever known. You close your eyes. You breathe. You exist. And in this simple, aching, endless act of surviving, of refusing to give in to hunger, to cold, to the indifference of the earth, you realize something profound: history isn't written by the victors. It's carried quietly, day after day, by hands like yours. The nobles' castles will crumble, their names forgotten in dust. But the furrows you cut into this field will outlast them all. Tomorrow, you'll rise again before dawn. You'll stretch your stiff limbs, light the fire, and step out into the morning fog. The same routine, the same burden, the same faint thread of gratitude holding it all together. And though no one will ever write your name in a book, every grain of bread, every wall, every life that comes after will carry your echo, You are not the story's hero. You are the story's heartbeat. And without you, the world would never have woken. The fire burns low now. The crackle softens to a whisper. You can still see the faint orange glow dancing across the walls of your cottage, the quiet rhythm of embers giving way to ash. Outside, the wind sighs gently through the thatch, like the earth itself is breathing with you. Your body feels heavy, the kind of tired that sinks deep. Not painful, not sharp, just a slow release. Your muscles unwind. Your thoughts drift like smoke. You picture the fields, green again, alive again, and the sun rising behind the mist. You see the soil you've worked, the same ground that took your strength, but gave you life. Each blade of grass, each ripple of wind feels like a promise kept. There is no rush now. No plow to lift, no lord to fear, no hunger to fight. Just rest. You've done enough. You've survived the day. Let the story fade, slowly, gently. The sounds of the village slip into silence. The creak of wood. The far-off bark of a dog, the soft breath of sleep. You are warm, you are safe, you are home. And as the stars bloom quietly over the dark fields, you feel it, the deep, ancient calm of a world still turning, still alive, because you were part of it. Rest now, traveller. Sweet dreams.